years before anybody else was talking about artificial intelligence. We all had it in our life, right? We had Siri, we had the ability to ask our phone questions and or to tell a speaker to play a different genre of music. But some people thought that was pretty cool and that's it, right? Well, the people at NVIDIA said, that's really cool. And what would happen if we could take that to the next level? And they started building the backbone, the products that would take it to the next level. So that when this little company called OpenAI came along a few years later, and they needed a product that would help them build a little thing called ChatGPT, NVIDIA was their answer. So NVIDIA's thinking about something differently than everybody else did allowed them to be in the place that they would be able to take advantage of the spark when it occurred. When ChatGPT was announced, the very next day, NVIDIA was worth $32 billion more than they were the day before. That's momentum.
Welcome to LeaderShop, the podcast where leadership meets real-world insights. In each episode, you can eavesdrop on exclusive conversations with top thought leaders, best-selling authors, and experts in leadership, communication, relationships, culture, and everything else that shapes your effectiveness in the workplace and in your personal life. LeaderShop is here for you. Now, here's our host, himself a seasoned coach and best-selling author, Dr. Roger Dean Duncan.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to LeaderShop, the podcast where we explore the habits, mindsets, and systems that shape extraordinary leadership. Today's guest is Don Yaeger. Don was a longtime associate editor at Sports Illustrated and is the author of more than a dozen best-selling books. Don has spent decades studying the habits of world-class performers, championship coaches, and transformational leaders. He's co-author of a new book titled The New Science of Momentum. Don unpacks how elite coaches and leaders ignite lasting performance from a single spark. Whether you're leading a team, building a business, or mentoring others, this conversation will challenge how you think about energy, culture, and sustained excellence. We'll dive into the science behind momentum, the psychology of peak performance, and the tactical frameworks that turn fleeting inspiration into enduring impact. If you've ever wondered how great leaders build unstoppable teams or how to spark your own breakthrough, this episode is for you. Don Yaeger, welcome to LeaderShop.
Thanks so much, Roger.
In the context of leadership, how do you define momentum?
Well, momentum at its core is a mindset. Right. It's funny, there are all kinds of folks who want to apply scientific formulas to it because there is obviously some science and the skill of creating momentum. But truthfully, in organizations, and if that's what we're really talking about, leaders who are taking a group of people off to accomplish something they might not naturally believe they can achieve, momentum is a mindset. It's that ability to believe I'm following the right person, I'm in the right organization, and we're headed in the right direction. And good things, if they're not happening today, are destined for us, right? There's a belief system that occurs around that. And that allows that when that moment occurs, we're all ready to take full advantage of it. And that's where momentum truly takes hold. I know that's where we're going to go over the course of this conversation, but it's a mindset is what I would argue is the great leadership answer to that question.
So how does momentum differ from motivation?
First off, motivation is very temporary, generally, right? Motivation is, I need you to get fired up right now so that we can do good things. There isn't anybody out there, Zig Ziglar, you name them, right, who would tell you that motivation is designed to last. Inspiration lasts. Motivation is very temporal. I would tell you that momentum, it's a process. That's one of the things that I think I was most excited to learn by working with these great leaders who have mastered the art of momentum, the science of momentum, is how they put together the process. And that's what this book is really all about.
So it sounds like if you have real momentum, you can occasionally have a bad day and still have momentum. Is that true?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, momentum doesn't mean everything is always moving up and to the right. That's impossible. You can look at some of the great companies who are in the the thick of momentum today, like NVIDIA, right? The great technology company. They have bad days. They have Chinese companies that come along and say, hey, we can do everything they could do for a fraction of the dollar. And for a few days, that was a big blow to their stock market price. That was a big blow to the momentum they had built as an organization. But pretty soon, people figured out it was what happens often when you're successful. People try to take you down by saying something they can't ultimately deliver on.
So how did you identify the principles that make up the science of momentum?
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, just Roger, I'll share with you that the kind of the background of the book, right? The background of the project. It was a 2017 Super Bowl, and the New England Patriots are facing the Atlanta Falcons. New England was slightly favored, but Atlanta gets out like gangbusters. By halftime, they're up by 3 touchdowns. In the middle of the third quarter, they're ahead 28-3, and the odds, all the prognosticators, the machines out there that tell you who's going to win and who's not, said that New England had a 0.6% chance of winning the game. Atlanta was at 99.4. And then a moment occurred, a moment where Tom Brady was sitting on the sidelines and said, you know what, we got to do just something. Give us something to hang our hat on. And as it happened, he went out and there was a play in which they were 3rd and 8, and Tom Brady was trapped behind the line of scrimmage, and he scrambled, which Tom Brady does not do very often because he was the least mobile quarterback in the history of the NFL, right? If you want to watch humor, go back and watch Tom Brady run the 40-yard dash at the Combine in Indianapolis when he was coming out of college. It's a laugher, right? Because he's such an embarrassment as a runner. But Tom Brady did something he'd only done one previous time all season long. He ran for 8 yards, right? And they got the first down. And when he did so, his teammates suddenly felt, you know what? I mean, here our leader is willing to go out and do something that's not in his typical wheelhouse. Our leader is stepping out of his comfort zone for us, and they rally. 6 plays later, they score a touchdown. And Tom Brady got the one touchdown he was looking for. But immediately he comes to the sideline, starts grabbing the defensive players and saying, give me the ball back. Give me the ball back. Let's do it again.
Right.
And the defense rallies. First off, momentum, like most everything in life, requires leadership. And Tom Brady in this role was providing the leadership. He was providing the enthusiasm that people needed to hear from their leader. They score a field goal, and pretty soon it's now 28-12. And Tom Brady's running up and down the sidelines saying, hey, we're only down by 2 scores.
Right, we're on a roll.
Now, they were down by 2 scores if you scored 2 touchdowns and 2 two-point conversions. The odds of that being less than 4% in any game, let alone a Super Bowl. But Tom Brady wanted everybody to believe we're only down by 2 scores. Yeah, the defense went out, sacked Matt Ryan, got a fumble. Tom Brady scores again. They score a 2-point conversion, and now it's only an 8-point game. The game that was out of control just a quarter ago is now a 1-score game. And I interviewed a number of the players that were on the field that night, and one of them, Devin McCourty, said to me, when we were only down by a touchdown, it was all reflected in the eyes of the competitors. Their eyes were big because they knew we were coming. Our eyes were narrow because we knew we were focused. The eyes showed that the momentum had changed sides, and everybody knew what was going to happen next. And they do. New England comes down, they score again. They get another 2-point conversion. The game's tied, goes to overtime. New England wins, becoming the first team in Super Bowl history to ever come back by more than 15 points down. And they were 25 points down. So I came in the next morning, opened up the whiteboard at my office, and just wrote down the words, how does a moment turn into momentum? How does that occur? How did what happened last night occur? That began an 8-year journey for myself and General Bernard Banks, my co-author, where we interviewed the greatest leaders in the world, in the worlds of politics, sports, business, and the military, to talk about how momentum plays into their decision-making, how momentum plays into their strategy. And what we found was those who do it really well actually have a model. They actually have a way that they attack this concept, and it's different than those who don't. That was the general way in which we began the project, and after we began the project that way, it took on a life of its own, as momentum does.
Don, you talk about a single spark. What does that spark typically look like in a business organization?
So that's the challenge, right? You use the word typical, and there's no such thing. Right?
Okay.
The beauty of a spark is it could be the company you most want to beat when you're head to head.
Your competitor, yeah.
What would happen if your competitor, if the CEO were to get caught on a video at a Coldplay concert hugging up on his HR director?
Oh, that could never happen.
Oh, that would never happen. But if it did, how could that be a spark for you? Yes, it could. Hey, what would happen if the President of the United States were to randomly pick countries around the world to issue ridiculous tariffs to, right? I mean, that would never happen. No president would ever do that. But if the president did that, what would it mean for your company, and what could it mean for you versus those you're competing against? The bottom line is sparks can come from anywhere. The spark could be, I'll tell you, in our company, I have a company with a number of employees, and back in 2020, I got COVID. And I got COVID so bad that I ended up in the ICU.
Oh.
And on day 6 in the ICU, they weren't sure I was going to live, right? There was some questions. Out of that moment, our team realized everything in our organization is really based on Don's ability to be out in the public, right? It's Don this, Don that.
Yeah.
So what are the ways we could adjust our company so that if Don was unavailable, temporarily or maybe permanently, right? We don't want to think that way. But what could we do organizationally to still be a company of value? And we created a whole different set of products. So it was a negative experience. It was something that was life-threatening in that moment, but it changed the dynamic of our company. Your spark could come from any one of a million different ways. But the question is, are you ready for it? Most people are not.
So how can leaders identify a spark before it becomes obvious to everyone else? What do you look for?
Well, first, I don't know that it's necessary that the leader identifies it before everybody else. Sometimes it's pretty good if one of your teammates tells you,
oh, sure.
Hey, by the way, hey, check this out. This could be something of value. What you want is a mindset. So some of the teams that I've worked with, that I had the chance to study while working on this, they have monthly meetings where they literally do a spark game plan, right? They randomly throw out ideas like the Coldplay concert and say, what would we do if our opponent had that situation, or if our competitor had that situation? What would we do if a hurricane were to come into our part of the country and destroy maybe one of our most important plants, or what would it maybe do damage to the homes of many of our employees? What are some of the ways you think about possibilities, even though some might say they are not probabilities? Because even in the exercise of thinking about opportunity coming to us,
well, it's mental gymnastics.
It's mental gymnastics, but being a gymnast is a dang good thing if you're a part of a team. So you want to build a team of mental gymnasts. And so to that end, one of the most important elements, one of the things we discovered was that the best teams who could capture and take advantage of momentum had built a what if team on their organization. What if this? What if that? And that little group of people had their eyes out at all times for what was happening in the industry, in the economy, in nature, right? I mean, they were looking at things that could be advantageous for us to take advantage of.
Sounds like it'd be fun to work on that what if team.
It would be, right? It would be. But at the same time, somewhat frustrating, because you're probably going to throw out ideas that everybody's going to laugh at, right? And
that could never happen. Yeah.
No, that could never happen. I mean, when something similar, even ridiculously, comes out of the woodwork, you suddenly look like the, Nostradamus, right? You're the genius. So this idea of creating a mindset internally that we have to be on the alert. We have to have our eyes out, our antennas up, because you never know where that spark's going to come from. And if you build an organization that has recruited the right people, people who could cheer for each other, if you've built the right culture, a culture that actually says, we're a growth culture, we're going to be looking for opportunity, and then you prepare that group of people to start thinking that way, when the spark occurs, you're going to be the first to notice collectively. And by being the first to notice, you're going to be first to market. And we all know what happens at that stage.
Can a spark be manufactured?
Absolutely, it can be. The spark could be, we hired the new leader. We hired a new leader. The spark could be, we hired an employee who came to us from our competitor, and that employee brought with them some knowledge, capability, skill set that we didn't have previously. Yes, the spark can be manufactured. It doesn't have to be external. It could actually even be internal. Somebody might come up with an idea to solve a problem that no one had previously thought of. That could become the spark. I mean, at NVIDIA, one of the companies I had the chance to study in the writing of this book, I mean, they'll tell you, years before anybody else was talking about artificial intelligence, we all had it in our life, right? We had Siri, we had the ability to ask our phone questions and or to tell a speaker to play a different, genre of music. But that artificial intelligence, some people thought that was pretty cool and that's it, right? Well, the people at NVIDIA said, that's really cool. And what would happen if we could take that to the next level? And they started building the backbone, the products that would take it to the next level. So that when this little company called OpenAI came along a few years later, and they needed a product that would help them build a little thing called ChatGPT, NVIDIA was their answer. So NVIDIA is thinking about something differently than everybody else did, allowed them to be in the place that they would be able to take advantage of the spark when it occurred. When ChatGPT was announced, the very next day, NVIDIA was worth $32 billion more than they were the day before.
Wow. And
now they're the first $5 trillion company market cap in the world.
I'd call that momentum.
That's momentum.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it's very important when you're recruiting people to do your best to recruit people who ask unasked questions and who, to use a cliche, think out of the box.
Yeah, and it's also, so that's one element of recruiting. The second is, one of the challenges with a lot of organizations is if we want to go hire A-dogs, right? We want as many A-dogs as we can get. Well, a lot of A-dogs don't like it when the moment of celebration, the moment where someone's being hailed as the answer to our current situation is not me, right? If I'm an A-dog and they decide to hold a party to celebrate Roger because Roger did something really good, Roger made the big sale today that we really wanted, that we needed as an organization, there are a lot of A-dogs that would sit in the back of the room and grouse, like, that should have been my deal. I should be the one that's up there getting patted on the back. And if you're recruiting people who can't actually cheer for their teammates, you probably are creating some destructive nature when momentum starts to show its face. When you start to get things moving, there will be backbiting that most organizations can't handle. So it's important to recruit people. Mirror neurons are real, right? Mirror neurons are this idea that I feel what you feel if we're in simpatico, right? If we're together on this journey, then I feel what you feel. If we're not together in this journey, I despise what you feel. And when you start getting into that place, you need a team of people who are headed in the right direction together.
Your change initiative has the budget. The strategy looks solid, and everyone's nodding along in the meetings. But for some reason, it's going nowhere. Dr. Roger Dean Duncan knows why. After 40 years in the trenches with top business leaders, he knows that change fails when organizations lack the right foundations: trust, accountability, and real communication. Dr. Duncan's free 10-minute assessment shows you exactly where your organization stands. Answer a few straightforward questions that reveal your true change readiness level. Don't waste months discovering the hard way. Get your free assessment today at leadershop.net/change. Again, that's leadershop.net/change.
Well, if I'm an NFL coach, there's enough information out there that I can probably get a pretty good feel for a player that I'm thinking about drafting. But if I'm an executive at an organization, a business organization, and I'm interviewing somebody who maybe has or has not been on social media, et cetera, how can I determine if that so-called A dog is going to work in the organization or is going to sit in the back of the room and pout?
There are questions you could ask. And again, sometimes A-dogs are pretty, especially if you set it up as if you're just asking the question like, hey, I get it. Boy, sometimes, when you're as successful as you've been, when the success suddenly falls to one of your teammates, that can rub some folks the wrong way. I mean, how are you in that moment? And if it's positioned right, they may think, oh, they're saying it's okay for me to think that way. Oh, so I want to tell them that I do, because I do feel that way. If you position it as, the worst people in the world are the ones who say, then a good interviewer is going to lie and tell you what you want to hear. But you also may want to, if you know somebody at the organization you're hiring them from, ask.
Sure.
What is it like when they're not are they the ones who sit and gossip about their teammates? Because that's indicator number one that they would be a problem for you.
Yeah. So how do you build a culture where momentum becomes self-reinforcing?
Well, you talk about it. And that's one of the things that we discovered. One of the elements we experienced while building this book was we went into the field with a couple of research firms, and we actually polled 4,000 American adults, right? So they were in the workplace, adults in the workplace. And what we found was 91% of them believe in momentum. So it's the overwhelming number. I struggled. I kept wanting to I wanted the detail on the 9%. I wanted to call them and find out, what are you thinking? Do you really not believe?
What's going on here?
How can you not believe in this? But that's okay. 9% don't believe. But of the 91% who do believe, first off, if you just reduce the pool of people that we're talking about in our interview pool, right, our research pool, to people who had served in the military, had played team sports, or who had ever been a leader in an organization, took those three elements and you just put them in one bucket, the number was 100%. They believed in momentum. Those three groups always believed in it. But one of the things that stood out was that of the 91% who do believe, only a quarter of them had ever heard the word momentum described in their company. It never comes up. People don't talk about it. And so if you want to build a culture that values momentum, that actually, you need to talk about it. What does it mean to be in momentum together? What could it mean for all of us if momentum were to suddenly be able to take us to the next place? If the year ahead could be even better, momentum is really important. And so that's one of those things that we need to think about, talk about, is how do we talk about momentum as an organization?
And you need to talk about it in very explicit terms. This is what it looks like. This is what it could look like. This is what it could mean to all of us.
And this is also where you start realizing how important it is to think about who we recruit. Because there are some people, when they start thinking about momentum, their immediate reaction is, that's going to be more work for me. If we get momentum, if more opportunity comes our way, I'm going to have to do more work. Now, those are not the people that will help you get to momentum, right? So what are the kind of questions that you can ask of a candidate? Hey, when things were really going gangbusters and suddenly more work showed up on your plate than you thought you had room for, how did you navigate that, right? And part of it was, hey, boy, I tell you, there's nothing worse when that happens, because there's no way you can do a good job if you've got more work than you can do. Well, that, by the way, is probably not a candidate that's going to get you there.
Right. So when trying to build momentum, how do you deal with skepticism or resistance? Not every organization has a Tom Brady walking up and down the sideline talking to his teammates.
Well, let's be real. Skepticism is human nature.
Sure.
Humans are wired for skepticism. So what you need is literally to have a culture carrier, someone in your organization, someone who is well regarded, but is also very publicly enthusiastic about what's going on in the organization. So, what does that look like? How can you as a leader tap that person to play a role in making sure others feel what's going on.
So what behaviors tend to kill momentum faster than anything else?
Well, I think the one thing that kills it more than anything else is selfishness, right? Selfishness actually is a challenge to anything we're doing, right?
Sure.
It's pretty crazy.
So if momentum is lost, can it be restored? And if so, how?
Absolutely it can. I mean, momentum doesn't last forever.
Sure, you're going to have some peaks and valleys.
Right. I mean, if you watch the entire science of momentum is you go to Jim Collins' flywheel, right? I mean, the idea is you build momentum, and ultimately the flywheel takes over and it flips the wheel upside down. But it doesn't last forever. And so one of the first things you have to do to try to get it to last it's the longest possible is to reduce all the friction points, right? Just as you would in a flywheel. Like, what are the friction points in there that might keep it from continuing? So, are there employees who are making things difficult? Are there elements of your culture that are making things difficult? Is this concept just not one that we've talked about enough? So, what are some of these things that we've already hit on these subjects pretty well so far? But how do you build those into the life of your organization? And if you're doing it well, what's going to happen is you will reduce friction points and will give you your greatest opportunity. But it still doesn't last forever. So when it stops, the key is to celebrate and enjoy all that came from that experience so that people are ready for the next opportunity. Remember, it's going to take something. Something will help push us into that experience again, but we have to be ready for it. And so how are you ready for it? You celebrate, you look at the outcomes, you seek feedback on what did we do well, how could we recreate that moment? And those who do that really well, one of my favorite organizations to work around is the Blue Angels.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Fasting.
Life or death.
Life or death. Life or death. Think about it, 550 miles an hour. If you reach your hand above your head right now, the plane above you would be at your fingertips. If there wasn't a canopy over your head, the plane above you would be at your fingertips. It's pretty amazing. But the one thing about that organization is, half of their pilots, a third of all their ground crew leave the organization every year because they move on to another duty station in the Navy. And so in that situation, they begin every season practically as a new team. Well, I mean, it definitely is a new team, but even though you might have some experience, you have to figure it out again together as a group. And so their goal is to build momentum so that they're better every time. They're better at every show that they do. They're better every practice. And the way they do that, they have a feedback loop that is fantastic. After every practice, after every show, they walk into a room, just the pilots. They take from their sleeves their rank, so there's no rank in the room, and they break down what they did. I adopted so much of what they taught me. We have a phrase in our own company that says feedback is the breakfast of champions.
Right.
And champions eat breakfast. And so how do you build for it? You create this environment that is constantly in the growth mode so that you are ready when the next opportunity comes your way.
Well, you just touched on something I was going to touch on in my next question. It seems that in all of this, as with every organization, every culture, every relationship, it's really important to be willing and able to have those straightforward conversations.
Absolutely.
And I love what you just said. They take their rank off the sleeve. I mean, that is so critical. And as you've seen, I'm sure, and I have in many organizations, the boss is sitting at the table and he says, tell me what you think. And people have learned not to dare to tell him what they really think.
Exactly.
And that's deadly.
Yep. No, and unfortunately, I mean, you know it, right? And everybody knows. Oh, boy. I ask that all the time when I get a chance to work with organizations is, what do we say we stand for? Okay, that's one thing. And then the next question is, what do we really stand for? I love when I get a chance to talk to a team, talk to an organization. I might get told, yeah, boy, we start every meeting on time because that's an absolute sign of respect for our team. Then you get to talk to the team, and everybody will tell you, yeah, we're always 6 minutes late. And we know that if you show up 6 minutes late, you don't miss anything. So it doesn't matter what you say, it's what you do, right?
I think it's important for organizations to say, here's what we stand for. I think it's also important for them to say, here's what we won't stand for.
Right.
And there are a lot of organizations, Enron comes to mind, that had the first part okay, but they never talked about the second part, and that became a problem.
I will tell you, as a young journalist, I was working in San Antonio, Texas, and I was sent to Houston to interview some executives of this company that was just blowing the lid off, right?
Yeah, right.
And it was Enron. And I remember walking into the front door of their magnificent office workplace, and what they had there was, their core values, the Enron core values. And number one on the core value was integrity.
Oh, yeah.
Integrity. And I'm thinking, it's just, and I remember I was fascinated by that. I was a young reporter, so I didn't know any better, right? And suddenly you look at that and you go, boy. Later you come back to realize what we had there was anything but at the same time, I didn't know any better. It was just one of those things that fascinated me years later. It took years to figure it out.
Well, there are a lot of lessons around us if we'll look for them.
Exactly.
So how do powerful teams create momentum that outlasts individual contributions?
Well, again, I think that there's a recognition that true team momentum, while individuals will contribute to it, they're not the answer, right? They're not the answer to it. So I think it's really important to make that point. This isn't an individual awards category, right?
Right.
This isn't best in show. And so how do you make sure that you're doing the right thing?
So what advice do you have for leaders about managing momentum during organizational change?
Well, obviously, sometimes the environment is difficult for momentum to take hold. And organizational change may be one of those moments when what you want is not to go backwards, right? So it's one of those things that you sit and you go, wow, I want to make sure that we're not going backwards.
So a lot of organizations, because of COVID and a lot of other things, now have hybrid or remote teams. How can leaders build momentum in that kind of environment?
That's like everything else, culture, everything. Remote is difficult in any of these fronts, right? I mean, let's be honest, that's the truth, but it's not impossible. What it really requires is a higher level of communication that you have to be willing to jump into. And so be more attentive. I had the opportunity to work on a book with the Delta CEO, Ed Bastian. And one of the things that stood out to me was during COVID, he set up a couple of white chairs in the corner of his office and a camera, and he would sit there every day and he would do a Zoom with, 100,000 employees.
Wow.
He would tell them what he knew and what he didn't, right? And so that level, he said that ability to over communicate is what allowed in that environment for them to still maintain a dynamic level of trust, a belief that the leadership had their best interest in mind, and that the leadership was looking for that opportunity to take advantage of what was going on, and the rest of the world was busy just trying to survive. So over-communicate would be an important role.
So psychological safety clearly has a positive influence with momentum. People need to feel comfortable speaking up, challenging the status quo.
Yes. That ability to create an environment where people do not mind stepping in, asking questions. But again, to do that, you have to learn as a leader not to react, even with your body language, not to react when moments don't show up as you hope them to. And I think that's one of the things that many leaders struggle with.
Don, you wrote a book with a man named Mike Flint.
One of my favorite people on the planet.
And the book is titled The Senior, and it became a motion picture, which I saw recently.
Thank you.
It's about how Mike Flint returned to play college football at the age of 59, which is mind-boggling. Tell us about how you came to work with Mike on that and what we can learn from his experience.
Well, The backstory is really great. Obviously, he was a good college football player, really good college football player at a small school in South Texas. And going into his senior year, he's best player on the team captain. But he loved to fight. Mike Flint loves to punch people, right? And unfortunately, he got into one too many fights on the eve of the senior season. The team was expected to be good. He was going to be the leader. And the university president said enough, and he threw him out of school. And by throwing him out of school, the team lost its captain. The team basically had a horrible season. And for years, Mike Flint felt so guilty about his lack of discipline and what it cost his teammates that he couldn't even communicate with them. As it happened, they were doing a team reunion 25 years later, and they decided to invite Mike. And when he showed up, which he struggled to do, but when he finally got there, he said to his teammates, I feel guilty. Like, the one regret I have in my life is that I let you down. And one of his teammates said, by the way, the rules of college football say you still have 1 year of eligibility left. If you really regret what you did, go back and play your senior season for us. And at 59 years old, Mike Flint went and tried out for the college team, made the squad, and became kind of its inspirational leader, and ended up getting a chance to deliver on a pretty significant play at the end of the season that made a difference and got carried off the field. And
it's a true story. I mean, this isn't fiction.
No, I was there. And I will tell you, one of the crushers for me is that it took 17 years for the movie to get made after we wrote the book. So, because it's so, to me, it's a made for big screen moment. And unfortunately, that's why I'm not in the movie business. But I got the chance to experience it, which was once in a lifetime for me.
Well, Don Yeager, thank you so much for joining us on LeaderShop. As Don has reminded us, momentum is not a mystery, it's a craft. It begins with a spark, but it becomes powerful only when leaders nurture it with intention, clarity, and consistency. The best leaders don't wait for momentum to simply appear. They create the conditions where it can thrive. So as you step back into your own work, ask yourself, what spark is already present that you've been overlooking? What small action could turn that spark into a fire? Remember, momentum rewards movement, not perfection. Start where you are and let the spark grow. Don's book is The Science of Momentum. Grab a copy. And to learn more about Don's work, go to donyeager.com. That's Don Yeager, Yaeger.com. If you found this episode valuable, please share it with your team, your network, or anyone else who's ready to build a fire from a single spark. Be sure to leave a review of our podcast. Even a single sentence fuels the algorithms that promote the great content that the LeaderShop podcast offers. And for free resources to help you in your leadership journey, go to leadershop.net. That's leadershop.net. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, stay safe, be happy, and spread good cheer wherever you go. For LeaderShop, I'm Roger Dean Duncan.